So I've gone ahead and just pulled up the sensitive data exposure portion of the guide, and you can see it's pretty much gaining access to confidential information, unwanted information, finding a backup file, etc. And this all boils down to enumeration. Just like I said before, a lot of this is enumeration or discovering an item that should not be exposed, and that's really what it is. So everything that I've given you so far in terms of tools and techniques is available to you to actually attack this and try to find things. The one thing that I can say is we'll walk through this just one here, and if we did a quick Dirbuster against this website, we would find a directory on here called FTP. And guess what? FTP has a bunch of different files in here, including backup files, KDBX, which is like a key storage database, right, for your passwords. Quarantine, there's different kinds of malware stuff in here. So there's a lot of interesting things in here. And this is just one of the data exposures. But this is what I'm talking about. Like when I told you in the last video that I found a backup folder of literally the backup of the website, that happens. The other thing to point out is, coming into here and you just need to dig into every single folder and read what's going on in the response. Every response is important. You have no idea what you're going to find. And just looking through here, like you could search at the bottom something like password, or you could search for key or keys. I always search for those and try to find anything related to keys. And it just takes time to go through these and look through all the different responses and see what they're doing. And like, especially JavaScript, if you can get JavaScript to pull down with the response, that's always good. And yeah, that's really it. So the one thing that we're missing here that I wish that we had, but I could still show you, is this dashboard, like I showed you with the active scanning. It also does this passively for us. So this is what's really nice about Burp Pro, is it's good at finding what I call the low findings without doing much of anything. And one of those is something like response headers. Now these response headers are important, and it's also good at finding looking at the cookies as well, which we'll talk about that when we get to cross-site scripting. But the response headers are important because we can see what kind of protections they have here. And these different protections are, how we can defend against certain things. And one of the defenses was something called HSTS, which stands for HTTP Strict Transport Security. Now that is a header that should be set in order to prevent an attack where we take secure data, say HTTPS, we strip it, and it's called a protocol downgrade attack, and we make it HTTP. And then guess what? All of your encrypted data is now unencrypted. So there is a header out there that is called Strict Transport Security. Guess what? I'm not seeing it on here. You would say Strict Transport Security. Because of that, that means that HSTS is not enabled here, and we could attack this website with a downgrade attack. Now that is a man-in-the-middle type attack. It's not something that's necessarily easy, but it's something that could be performed and is reportable to a client. And a good website for this, if you're testing against something that's externally facing, which we're not, so we can't do this, but securityheaders.io or .com works, either one. You just come in here and you scan a website. And for example, we can scan tesla.com, and you can take a look, and it gives you a report right away. It says C. Okay, and it comes through here and it says, here's all the different headers, which remember we looked at the headers and we saw all the different weird Tesla headers. This isn't really common. But you come through here and it says, hey, look, you're missing this header, and this header. And you have these headers here. Look, here's the strict transport security header that we're talking about. And you can come through here and see it. Like here it is in green. They have it. That's good, right? But they're still missing some headers down here. So I always like to take screenshots of what they're missing, so that way they have best practices and what they should be including. So this is just another way. It's not necessarily sensitive data exposure with the security headers, but it is when we include the HSTS. So you should be considering and thinking about security headers as well when you're doing these sorts of searches. One other thing to point out is that we should also be looking at the level of encryption on the website. Now, there is a tool that we can use for that, and it's called Nmap. It's a great tool, and we can use it to scan a website and see what level of encryption they are and get a rating or report back. So let's take a look at that. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to a new tab here. And again, since we're not using HTTPS on this site, it's not going to be relevant. So I'm going to scan this against Tesla, but we can just say something like Nmap, and then we could say script equals an SSL enum cipher. So we're looking at the ciphers and how strong their ciphers are. And we could just say port 443 tesla.com, something along this lines. Okay, hit enter. And it should just take a second to come back, depending. It's going to go out, pull down all the SSL information, and then drop down a list of information back to us. And it's going to say, hey, it's going to give it by grade, like A, B, C, D, F. And so go ahead and let this scan. If it takes a second, go ahead and just pause the video and then come back when you're done scanning. Okay, so we're back, and you can see the least strength is an A. This is fantastic. This means that Tesla goes in there and they really take care of business. If we were to see like an F or even a C, we would probably report this. Like if they have bad ciphers, that's reportable. Again, it's a low finding, but this has to deal with that sensitive data exposure. If we can attack a cipher, and again, this is a very complicated attack, but if we can downgrade, something like SSL or TLS, whatever, we can overcome, the encryption, and we can then we can get the sensitive data exposed to us. So it's always good to check for this as well. These are just best practices kind of as we're going and we're mentioning these that we should be checking for. So I know this can be a lot and a little bit overwhelming, so please, again, take notes. I'm going to keep harping on this. Take notes, rewatch this if you need to, rewatch the entire web app portion if you need to. But make sure you're checking for security headers. Make sure you're checking for the SSL ciphers. This is two basic common checks that you're going to want, especially when you're writing reports up against a client and a website. So that's it for this. Next, we're going to get into XML external entities, which are incredibly fun and incredibly dangerous. So I'll catch you over in the next video.